Hi everybody, Andre here at Coach's Hangout, a spot where you can come and leave your requests, and from time to time our trainers drop by and may leave some helpful content for our students. Today I wanted to record a video on a really challenging derivatives question that can be found in our exam preparation tools. Now you may be thinking, I just watched you take up a really challenging derivatives question. It's hard to say, never mind sometimes understand. I just saw you take up another derivatives question. Why a second one? Is it that big a focus on the exam? Well, first of all, there's an entire chapter delivered to it. So yeah, it can be pretty important for your exam. But more important than that, a lot of students find derivatives to really be a struggle point for them. If you're working through the course, if you're going to hit a chapter that might make you think, second guess yourself or think, maybe this, what have I done to myself taking this course and perhaps give up. For a lot of students, it's the derivatives chapter. So with that in mind, I wanted to take up another question, really just to show you how this stuff isn't really as complicated as it seems, at least in terms of the Canadian Securities Course. Now, if you want to sell derivatives, yeah, you got to take a bunch of other courses and are really going to dive into the mechanics and strategies and whatnot. But in terms of the Canadian Securities Course, what you need to know for derivatives, isn't that bad, especially with good training and strategies on how to look at certain concepts and tackle different questions. So if you look on the screen now, you'll see a question that I'm sure would scare the heck out of a lot of students if they're not prepared. So let's first look at the question. It says Terry's short 10 coffee bean futures contracts. The contract will be cash settled upon expiry. Each contract represented 100 containers of coffee beans. Well, that's a lot of coffee beans, with a strike price of $80 per container. Upon expiry, the price of coffee beans was $90 per container, and what payment will be made at expiry. And you've got answers here, two say the short would pay the long, two say the long would pay the short. I'm sure a lot of our students are saying, I don't even know what that means. Can you translate that into English, please? And we're certainly going to help you out with that as we tackle this question together. So first, let's talk about what is a futures contract. Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. Fortunately, it's a contract between two parties. One party wants to buy a commodity. Another party wants to sell that same commodity. They agree on a price, and the transaction will take place at a future date. And that's where the name futures contract comes from. Maybe it's in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever the case may be. So that's what a futures contract is. Simply put, it's a contract between two parties where one party's going to buy, the other party's going to sell. They're going to agree upon a price and a future expiry date, and that's when the transaction will actually occur. Now, there is something also called a forwards contract, which is really similar, but also quite different in some ways. Futures contracts trade on an exchange. So you really got the exchange as the middleman, but between both parties. And as a result, those future contracts are more standardized. Where forwards that trade in the over-the-counter market, there is no exchange involved. They're not as standardized, and therefore they can be more flexible, but there's greater default risk because no exchange is involved. It's just you and another party entering into a contract in the over-the-counter market. Now, the key thing that could pop up on the exam is you want to know that futures trade on an exchange, forwards trade over-the-counter. Great little memory aid. Works for me. Forward has the letter O in it, and so does OTC. So that's how I keep them straight. We also have some new terminology here. Right? What does it mean when it says she is short the contract? What would it mean if it said she was long the contract? Well, you'll see this on the screen now. Short equals you're selling the commodity. Long equals you're the person buying the commodity. Now, sometimes I even get mixed up with this, so I came up with a memory aid that works well for me. I think it'll work for you too. I got to thank my dear old dad for this one. Now, he didn't grow up in Canada. He was born in South Africa, and then he immigrated to England, and then we immigrated as a family to Canada when I was a young boy, 45 years ago. So he sometimes uses some words that, perhaps, a lot of Canadians don't use in their day-to-day language. Now, my dad, if we were driving around on a hot summer's day and he wanted an ice cream, my dad would say something like, "I'm longing for an ice cream." And that would mean, I want to go buy an ice cream. So that memory aid works for me. Longing, my dad uses that word. I'm longing for something. It means he wants something. So that's how I keep these two terms straight in this context. Short equals you're selling the commodity. Long, you're longing for it. You're buying the commodity. It's a good little memory aid. Now, what does cash settled mean? Well, first of all, let's take a look here. Let's do the math on how many containers that these 10 contracts represent. Now you'll notice Terry is short 10 contracts, and each contract represents 100 containers of coffee beans. So that's 1,000 containers of coffee beans. Do you really think Terry wants 1,000 containers of coffee beans? Well, maybe if he or she owns a coffee shop, she has that, she might want to buy beans, or perhaps she produces beans, coffee beans, and that's why. But that's a lot of coffee beans. So there's a number of reasons why people may enter into a futures contract. It could be to lock in a future price. Sometimes we call that hedging. You're protecting yourself. So maybe a coffee bean producer is going to have a whole bunch of coffee beans available in 3 months. They're worried about the price going down. They might want to lock in their price. They might want to hedge or protect themselves. So they'll enter in a futures contract today. We call that hedging. Another investor might be just speculating. I mean, maybe Terry has no interest in coffee beans at all, and she's just betting on, what price, what way the price may move, and trying to profit from that speculation, if she's right. So again, futures contracts can be used to either hedge or protect a position by locking in a sale or purchase price, or it can be used to speculate. Now, when a question says it's cash settled, what that means is it's not physically settled. It means, actual beans are not going to change hands here. It's going to be cash settled. And really what they're going to do is they're going to look at, how much did the price change by? And that is what is going to dictate the payment that will need to be made from one party to the other. All right, let's dive into this question. I know it sounds really complicated, perhaps even still after what we've covered, but trust me, as we work through this question, it's really not that bad. If you understand the terminology and you understand how a cash-settled futures contract works, it's rather quite simple. So again, Terry is short the contract. So let's make a note here beside that. That means she's selling, right? Remember, longing, you're buying. If you're short, you're selling. So let's make a note here that she is selling coffee beans. Now, if you watch the other video where I covered that other challenging derivatives question, remember I asked you to think of derivatives as like a bet. It'll help you out with a lot of questions, right? Because you've got two parties. One is buying a commodity at today's price that they're agreeing upon. The other's selling. Well, they probably think differently as to what's going to happen to that price, right? If you're locking in your sale price today, well, you're worried about it going down. If you're locking in your purchase price today, well, you're worried about it going up, price going up. So when it comes to futures contracts, think of it like a bet. You've got two parties that believe two different things. Only one party is going to be right. That party is going to win the bet, so to speak, and is going to receive payment. So in this question, Terry is short the contract, which means she's selling coffee beans, and they agreed to a price of $80 per container. Now, what was the price upon expiry? $90 per container. Terry was wrong, right? She thought the price was going to go down, so she wanted to lock in her sale price. Price went up. She's lost the bet, so to speak. So she's going to have to make a payment, a cash payment for the difference in price to the other party. So with that knowledge alone, we can instantly eliminate C and D, right? We know that Terry lost the bet and she's the short. So she is going to have to pay the long. So right away, we've narrowed it down to the answer is either A or B. And now we just need to do the math. But we got to be careful here. It's not just the number of contracts times the price. We also have to factor in how many containers each contract represents. So to do the math, we're going to go 10 times 10 in our calculator times 100 containers times that $10 price change. The price went from 80 up to 90. That's a price change of 10. And we get $10,000. So the answer is B. The short, in this case Terry, will pay the long $10,000, which is the price movement of the price of coffee. And that's the answer. So really, it's that simple. If you get a question like this, think of a futures contract like a bet, all right, and ask yourself, well, what bet did did the person make? If they were right, well, they're going to be receiving money. If they were wrong, they're going to be paying money if it's cash settled. And then just do the math. Now, you're going to get more practice with that when you're working with the SeeWhy Learning tools. It really is a concept that becomes easy with practice. And I hope after this short little mini lesson and us taking up this question, you'll have better luck when you reach a question like this when you're preparing for your exam. Thanks, everybody.